The story is about a servant named Massetto, who worked in the king's palace. One day, he developed a relationship with his mistress, the king's wife. Their secret didn't stay hidden for long, and when the king found out, he ordered Massetto to be killed. Massetto somehow managed to escape and went far away, hiding his identity, seeking refuge in a distant church. He didn't know that the church, which looked pure from the outside, was actually filled with strange secrets and sins from within. The nuns here appeared to be devoted worshippers, but their hearts were full of desires and envy. Among them was Sister Fernanda, who one morning was returning to the church, holding her donkey along a forest path. As soon as she arrived, another nun, Sister Giannora, asked, "Where were you last night?" Fernanda replied, "The donkey ran away. I went to look for it." Giannora said in surprise, "I lock the gate every night." "Then how did your donkey run away?" Their conversation was going on when the church's gardener, Larco, passed by and laughed. "Good morning, sisters." But both scolded him angrily and sent him away. A little later, all the nuns gathered in the church for prayer. The superior, Sister Maria, asked Fernanda, "Where were you last night?" Fernanda gave the same reply. The donkey had run away. I was looking for it. Maria said nothing, but suspicion showed on her face. Another nun, Sister Alessandra, was sitting alone in her room sewing. She looked sad, tired of the church life, longing for freedom. Meanwhile, Sister Giannora and Sister Maria were busy discussing something secret. Behind the silent walls of the church, something was surely brewing. The next morning, Sister Giannora opened an ancient book in the old library of the church. Inside was a picture describing some old magical ritual. She read a few lines, her face filled with shock, and she quickly closed the book. Meanwhile, Sister Alessandra's father came to the church to meet her. In conversation, he said, "I'm looking for a good proposal for you, but every boy demands dowry." Alessandra replied, sadly, "If you reduce the donations you give to the church, we can save money for my dowry." Her father smiled. "No, my daughter, focus on your own life. Whether you marry or not, learn to stand on your own feet." Hearing this, Alessandra fell silent. She wanted to marry and live a happy life, but fate had built a wall in her path. In the afternoon, the three sisters, Alessandra, Fernanda, and Giannora, were taking the church-made clothes to the market. On the way, Alessandra told them what her father had said. The mood became sad. Just then, the church gardener Larco started looking at them strangely. Seeing that, the three got angry, went inside, threw his belongings around, and started shouting at him. Fernanda even hit him in anger. At that very moment, Father Tommaso was leaving the church to go to the market. On the way, he met Larco, who said, "Father, I don't want to work in the church anymore." Father said, "Don't be angry. Nothing like this will happen again." But Larco walked away silently. That same evening, miles away from the church, at Lord Bruno's mansion, dinner was being served. Bruno was sitting at the table with his wife, Francisca, but Francisca's attention was on the servant, Massetto, who stood in the corner. There was a silent yet dangerous attraction between them. When night deepened, that silence broke. Francisca came close to Massetto, and both crossed a sinful line, from where there was no return. At that very moment, fate took a new turn. In the darkness of the night, when everyone was asleep, suddenly footsteps echoed outside the door. Lord Bruno had returned home. Francisca and Massetto's faces turned pale. Massetto panicked and tried to jump out the window, but Bruno saw him from behind. Massetto ran into the servants' quarters and pretended to be asleep. Bruno, burning with rage, entered. He checked each servant's pulse, listened to their heartbeat, and when he reached Massetto, he became suspicious. Because of the darkness, he couldn't recognize him, so he cut a few strands of his hair and left, thinking he would identify him in the morning. But Massetto was clever. As soon as Bruno left, he cut a little hair from every servant's head. In the morning, when Bruno lined everyone up, everyone's hair looked the same. He shouted in anger, "Whoever it is, he's very clever, but I will catch him." Then he ordered all servants to have their hair fully cut short. The next day at breakfast, Bruno told his wife, "I know you're part of this too. If I find that servant, I won't spare you either." Francisca replied sharply, "You only give threats, Bruno. You never do anything." At that moment, Bruno noticed the gestures exchanged between Francisca and Massetto. Now his suspicion turned into certainty. He roared, "Guards, catch him!" Massetto understood everything and ran to save his life. The soldiers chased him, but he disappeared into the forest path, running through trees and thorns. He became exhausted and finally collapsed on a road, where a drunk man was stumbling. It was Father Tommaso. His cart had overturned, and his clothes had drifted away in the river. Massetto helped him, gathered his clothes, and lifted him up. The father said gratefully, "Son, where you going?" Massetto replied softly, "Nowhere. I'm just running away." Father said kindly, "Then come with me to the church. There's work and shelter too." Thus, a new chapter of Massetto's life was about to begin. Father Tommaso took Massetto to the church, gave him food, and said, "You'll have to live here pretending to be mute and deaf. Otherwise the nuns won't let you live peacefully." Massetto nodded in agreement. The next morning, Father took him to Sister Maria. He's skilled in every kind of work, but he's mute and deaf. Keep him in place of the old gardener. Sister Maria said briefly, "All right, we'll see how he works." Thus, Massetto became the gardener of the church, but the other nuns still didn't know about him. In the afternoon, Sister Fernanda came to the garden and was startled to see a stranger. She picked up an axe and shouted, "Who are you? What are you doing here?" Massetto motioned with his hands for silence. Just then, Sister Alessandra and the superior Sister Maria arrived. Maria explained, "He's a new gardener, mute and deaf. You're mistaken." Fernanda, annoyed, put down the axe and left. That same evening, Maria told all the sisters, "The clothes we made were snatched by robbers on the way to the market. From now on, we'll have to work faster and harder to finish things quickly." A few days later, Alessandra was seen working with an old nun, Viola. During work, the embroidery frame broke, so she went to Massetto to get it fixed. As soon as she arrived, Sister Giannora saw them from afar and quietly followed, watching them secretly. Alessandra said to Massetto, "Please fix this frame." Massetto began working silently. Alessandra slowly started speaking, "I want to leave this place. I'm tired of sewing and prayers. I want freedom." Massetto stayed silent. Giannora was shocked to see this. She realized something new was growing behind the silence of the church. Despite Alessandra's words, Massetto didn't express anything. He remained mute and deaf before everyone, as if he couldn't hear a thing. Alessandra knew he couldn't speak, so she openly shared her heart. That night, Father Tommaso came to Massetto's room. "How was your day?" he asked. Massetto replied softly, "Some sisters here are quite short-tempered, but I'll manage." Father smiled gently. "Don't worry, they won't harm you. Just keep pretending to be mute and deaf. If anything happens, tell me." Meanwhile, Sister Fernanda was in her room, when suddenly a stone hit her window. She looked out in surprise. Her old friend Marta was standing outside. Fernanda happily called her in, and both went straight to Alessandra's room. A little later, Giannora also joined them. The three nuns and Marta sat at the table drinking wine. Laughter and chatter changed the serious atmosphere of the church for a moment. Then Marta whispered secretly, "I'll tell you a secret. There's a certain herb. If you use it in a special way, any man will be drawn toward you." Hearing this, the three nuns were shocked, but deep inside they became curious. Massetto was working in the garden the next day when Alessandra came to him. "I made this handkerchief for you," she said softly, and gently wiped the sweat from his forehead. She sat close to him and began talking slowly. Marta's words from the previous night were still echoing in her mind. A few moments later, she leaned forward and kissed Massetto. He was startled at first, then silently drifted into her touch. Just then, the church bell rang. Alessandra got startled, quickly composed herself, and left in a hurry. Massetto sat there, stunned. That same evening, during prayer, Fernanda noticed dirt under Alessandra's fingernails and stains on her scarf. She didn't say anything, but the seed of suspicion had been planted in her heart. The next morning, Alessandra arrived with a glowing smile. Fernanda asked sarcastically, "What's the matter? You look very happy today." Alessandra lowered her gaze and said with a shy smile, "Last night was wonderful." Hearing that, Ginevra and Fernanda exchanged glances. The story was now taking a new turn. Alessandra's smile and demeanor turned Fernanda's suspicion into certainty. Fernanda asked calmly, "And why are your clothes so dirty?" Alessandra quickly replied, "I was working with the new gardener. That's why they got dirty." Fernanda pretended to believe her words, but a storm raged inside her heart. When Alessandra left, Ginevra said, "She's lying. Her behavior has changed." Fernanda whispered, "I'll find out what she's hiding." The next day at noon, Fernanda went to the forest with her friend Marta. Marta showed her the same herb she had mentioned the previous night. Both boiled it and made a liquid. Then, carefully, Marta dropped a few drops of it into Fernanda's eyes. After that, she made a small cut on Fernanda's finger and smeared the blood on her cheeks. A strange glow appeared in Fernanda's eyes, as if the spell had started taking effect. But they didn't know that Sister Ginevra was hiding behind the bushes, secretly watching everything. A little later, Fernanda and Marta returned to the church. They went straight to Massetto's room. As soon as the door was closed, Fernanda pulled out a knife and said, "Let's see how long you can pretend to be mute now." Massetto was shocked. Both Marta and Fernanda started approaching him. He tried to step back, but soon he fell under their magical influence. Within moments, the room was filled with heavy breaths and uncontrollable passion. After a while, both women composed themselves and left. Outside the door, Ginevra was waiting. She asked, "What were you two doing in there?" Fernanda avoided eye contact and said, "We came to check the cleaning." Both hurried away. Ginevra's face showed a mix of suspicion and anger. The next morning was a special day in the church. Head Father Bishop's inspection. Father Tommaso and Sister Maria welcomed him warmly. Outwardly, everything seemed peaceful, but inside, the air was filled with sin. During this time, Massetto quietly went to Alessandra's room. The door closed, and moments later, the same silent fire ignited again. But fate doesn't give second chances. Old Sister Viola suddenly walked in. Alessandra panicked and quickly composed herself. Massetto hid under the bed. Since Viola was half-deaf, she heard nothing. Alessandra calmly helped her, and when she got the chance, Massetto escaped through the window. The next day, Ginevra saw Massetto sitting alone in the courtyard. She thought, if that herb worked on everyone else, why shouldn't I try it too? She ground the herb, mixed it in a cup, but by mistake, instead of dropping it into her eyes, she drank it, and in that very moment, her world changed. After drinking the potion, Ginevra felt a strange sensation on her face. Her cheeks turned red, her breathing quickened, and her eyes gleamed with a wild glow. She made a small cut on her finger and smeared the blood on her cheeks, as if completing some demonic ritual. At that same moment, Alessandra arrived in Massetto's room. Her face showed anger and curiosity. "Why did you lie that you were mute?" she asked. Massetto was about to speak when footsteps were heard outside. It was Ginevra, staggering under the drug's effect, approaching the room. Alessandra panicked and hid behind the curtain, while Massetto pretended to be asleep. The door opened. Ginevra entered, her steps unsteady. She sat beside Massetto, touched his shoulder, and whispered, "You are so handsome." Massetto remained silent. Just then, another sound came from outside. Someone else was coming. It was Fernanda. Ginevra, frightened, hid in the same corner where Alessandra was already hiding. Their eyes met, fear, shock, and shame all at once. Fernanda entered the room with a knife in her hand. She tied Massetto's hands, blindfolded him, and shouted angrily, "Now you'll get the punishment you deserve, traitor." Alessandra and Genura were frozen in fear. Fernanda pushed Massetto outside and began dragging him toward the forest. Both nuns followed her quietly. Night had fallen. In the middle of the forest, an open clearing was lit by fire. Dozens of women half-dressed were chanting spells and dancing around the flames. Alessandra whispered in terror, "What is this?" Genura replied softly, "This is the ritual where a man is sacrificed to gain a witch's power." Massetto was tied up in the center. Fernanda and Marta stepped close to him. As they began chanting, Massetto screamed in terror, "Let me go." Everyone froze. They realized he wasn't mute. Under the influence of the drug, Genura lost her senses completely. She threw off her clothes and began dancing wildly with the other women. Seeing that terrifying sight, the others screamed and fled. Marta grabbed Genura angrily and shouted, "You ruined everything." The two started fighting. Meanwhile, Fernanda moved toward Massetto with a knife. But before she could strike, Alessandra rushed forward, shouting, "Stop, Fernanda!" She snatched the knife and freed Massetto. Behind them, Genura picked up a wooden stick and struck Marta on the head. Marta fell unconscious. Genura quickly wore Marta's clothes, grabbed her donkey, and fled toward the church. As soon as she arrived, she began screaming, "Fernanda is a witch! Catch her!" The church doors opened. Father Bishop and Father Tommaso came outside. Crying, Genura said, "I'm telling the truth. They're all part of sin." Moments later, Fernanda, Alessandra, and Massetto also arrived. Alessandra stepped forward and said, "This is all a lie, Father. She's drunk and doesn't know what she's saying." Silence filled the air. Now the truth had to be decided. Alessandra said to the bishop, "She's lying, Father. She drank the herb potion and is hallucinating." Genura screamed, "No, I'm telling the truth. These two have sinned with Massetto." Father Bishop shouted in anger, "Call Sister Maria." A few moments later, Maria came out, nervous and trembling. Before she could speak, the door opened, and Father Tommaso came out of her room. Everyone froze. The sacred image of the church collapsed in that moment. The bishop stared at them silently, then lowered his head and said, "I understand now. Sin has spread here more than faith." The next morning, all the sisters stood in a line in the church. Father Bishop spoke in a grave tone. "You all have violated the sanctity of God's house. Now seek forgiveness." One by one, they lowered their heads in shame. Father Tommaso received the harshest punishment. He was sent to a male monastery, where he would spend the rest of his life in repentance. Massetto was handed back to Lord Bruno. Bruno locked him in a cell and said, "I fed my wife to the dogs. Now it's your turn. I'll keep you alive so that every breath feels like torture." Massetto screamed in agony, but no one came. Then a small turtle crawled inside, a burning candle placed on its shell. The guards laughed and followed it curiously, unaware that the candle had been placed there by the three sisters, Alessandra, Fernanda, and Genura. As soon as the guards left, the three entered, freed Massetto, and tied a dummy in his place. Then they disguised Massetto in a nun's robe and fled toward the forest. Meanwhile, Sister Maria met Father Tommaso with a donkey. They looked at each other and smiled. Now only love remained between them, not faith. Suddenly, they heard Fernanda's voice in the distance. She was looking for her donkey. "How did my donkey get here?" she said in confusion. Genura whispered, "Let's get out of here." As they left, Maria and Tommaso stepped out from behind the trees. Maria said softly, "They freed Massetto." Tommaso smiled and replied, "Perhaps even God had mercy on them." They slowly walked away. In the distance, the church bell rang, as if God himself was offering a silent prayer at the end of the story. Thus ended the tale of the church that had witnessed sin, love, and repentance, and slowly faded into silence.